View series. Take a load off from your busy workday and listen to the dulcet tunes of our guests, who are all over the cybersecurity landscape. We're going to ask them some hard questions, not going to lie, probably some softballs too. But no matter what, it's going to be a good time. So sit back, pour yourself a nice hot cup of coffee, or something stronger if it's that time of day, and enjoy Coffee Talk with Serge.
Hey, welcome to a special edition of Coffee Talk with Serge, our interview series. My name is Mick Baccio, and today we're going to be sitting down with a great friend of mine, Michael Rodriguez, aka Duckie. Michael, tell everybody about yourself. Like, what's the day job? What do you do?
Hey, man. So awesome to be on. Thank you so much. Given some of the other guests that you've had, wow. So thank you. So my name is Michael Rodriguez. I am a principal strategic consultant with Google Public Sector, formerly Mandiant Global Government. So we were all acquired by Google.
Yep, I remember that
last year.
Man-Google acquisition.
Yep, there's a T-shirt somewhere, I think, with that on it. November 1st, we all became Nooglers. I've got the hat somewhere.
You got the beanie.
I do. That was like a primary thing I wanted to get a hold of.
100%.
So fun fact, after 60 days, you're officially a Googler. Still super weird to think of myself as one. So that's my primary job. I'm also an instructor with Mandiant Academy.
Okay.
So it's the education arm of Mandiant, where I teach a bunch of classes for them and a couple other offerings that they have. And then I also am a cybersecurity subject matter expert for Google Space, which is part of cloud.
You said like Google Space, like not Google Drive, just a space bar, space.
Yeah,
okay.
Outer space,
right.
Which is pretty crazy.
That sounds interesting. We'll dive back into that, I'm sure. So I get the Mandiant Google acquisition, right? We all kind of made our jokes about that, and some of us,
we still do.
We do, but like they're just awesome. It's awesome, and I think it's fantastic for all the groups involved in it. But how did you get in? Like, you didn't just walk in there. Like, what's the career path? Like, did you have a cyber origin story? Like, how did you come to be Duckie first, and then the cyber Duckie? Is that part of it, or did that come later?
Duckie came later, so I guess we'll get to that part, I think. So cyber origin story. So I've been kicking around for a while, right? So I've got probably, something like over 20 years in information technology, a little over 15 of those in InfoSec. Way back when I started out, graduated college or high school rather in 1995, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I actually have a bunch of law enforcement folks in my family and thought this would be a great career path for me. While going to community college and taking criminal justice, I needed to make money. And always being sort of a nerdy kid, while I didn't sort of grow up in scene like some of our peers, I knew I loved computers, building them, messing around with them, just having all sorts of fun. And so what I did as a job is I started out, if you remember Computer City, it's part of Radio Shack. It's a long time ago, I know.
Shack.
Yeah, so what became CompUSA, I was one of those friendly red-shirted people, which now that I think about it, it's going to be a theme coming up later. Working at Upgrades Counter, putting in hard drives, building machines, all those.
Was that Circuit City or was that Computer City?
Computer City became CompUSA, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think I remember that. Wow, that was...
Okay. Yeah, a long time ago. This is just the healthy living, right? I don't know.
Red shirt was a young age then. That's when that came about.
Exactly. So turned out, hey, I can actually really make a living at this. So fast forward a little bit, a couple other jobs here and there. I ended up becoming a network administrator, like many of us. Worked for a couple of private companies. Eventually settled working for the state of New Jersey in the information technology department, because remember, this was a million years ago. So InfoSec wasn't the thing. It actually wasn't a phrase yet.
It was no thing. It was IT.
Yeah, and so it's a little weird, right? Because this path doesn't necessarily exist anymore, which is
Mhm.
probably a whole nother topic for a whole nother conversation. But eventually fell into infosec. There was a lot of obvious data that we needed to protect,
Right.
people's health information. Um, there at one point was an HIV registry, which is probably at that point it doesn't exist anymore, but that was our crown jewel
Mhm.
before crown jewel was a phrase,
Right.
right? And just kept doing that more and more often, and we're like, wow, this is awesome. Uh, Eventually left state service, went back to private sector, which was sort of an adventure in its own. And as a sort of running theme in my life of making connections and just meeting people at the right time, I took a SANS class. I heard back from the instructor a year later, hey, I'm building a team. It's this organization called Foundstone,
Okay.
which like the jaw dropped, right? So Foundstone, one of those sort of legendary early security companies.
That's right.
Again, just sort of an amazing career I somehow had. At the time, Foundstone was part of Intel Security, which
Okay.
is part of Intel. So I was like a real Intel blue badge. Uh, so I joined Foundstone. That was amazing. And I'm like, wow, all right, well, what do I do now? Right. Little did I know that eventually I'd realize, hey, it's time to move on, right? It's time to learn some more. It's time for another challenge. So I'm like, where can I go from Foundstone? I'll apply at Mandiant. Why not? Shoot at the moon, see what happens. By the time they actually got back to me, I'd forgotten I applied. So I was shocked twice. And they're like, hey, you seem to have something to offer us. Come work at Mandiant. Wow. Okay. And that's where things really get interesting for me. So you talk about an origin story. All of us like to work in different ways. All of us have sort of
Well, I think your path is similar to mine, and a lot of folks, talking to Ryan, mutual friend of ours. Um, Networking is really a fundamental backbone for a lot of the dinosaurs. Like knowing that plumbing and knowing the fundamental of like, hey, running Cat 5 or just keeping the network running, or keeping the systems patched, things like that. Things you grow up on because
mm-hmm,
kind of had to keep it running. The security was sort of baked into that,
right.
the work you were doing, just by the sake of you being the only person doing it. So I do think you mentioned, I think the path is still a valid path for a lot of people. It's just that you don't have to grow up just being that little computer kid. Uh, but I do appreciate your affinity for red shirts.
Yeah, yeah. I think we'll probably chat about that as we go forward. But yeah, so start off at Mandiant. Offered me the opportunity to do all sorts of crazy things. I say that by meaning that one of the worst questions I get is, "Hey, Michael, what do you do?" I could tell you what I do this quarter,
Right.
because one of the beautiful things about being at Mandiant and now at Google is that I feel like my job changes quarterly, depending on the engagements that I take on. And I basically only have one instruction, which is get it done.
Well, I
Uh,
mean that is the consultant life, right? When you are a consultant for a customer entity, whoever that is. I mean, I've seen pictures of you all over the globe, and it's fascinating. Just the scope of people, the reach of organizations that you'll be able to help, uplifting programs, up leveling programs, and like you said, just getting it done. I mean, I know it's stressful too. So, getting from younger Ducky to now, what would you tell a little fresh faced Michael Rodriguez getting into cyber? Like, is there something you get, like a word of advice you would just keep in your back pocket?
that face, by the way, looks just like this one minus the facial hair. It's really uncanny.
I've seen it.
Uh, yeah. So the number one thing I would tell previous me is take more chances, right? Uh, be brave if not fearless, and just try it. The worst thing that can happen is someone says no, right? I applied at Foundstone thinking, what's the worst that happens is they don't call me back. Turns out the worst or best that happened is they hired me, depending on your
Hmm.
point of view. Same thing with Mandiant. It was time to make a change. I had felt one of the reasons I left working for the state, even though I was, already vested, right, as a civil servant, was that I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew what was coming the next day, and I wasn't growing. And I've never looked back since, right? So same thing with Mandiant. I threw myself in, I applied, somehow it worked out. Even though we were acquired by Google, I did the same thing I always do, which is jump in head first and join the rest of, see what else is out there as far as being a Googler. So I guess the primary thing I would say is just, you can be afraid, but jump ahead and jump in anyway, because the worst that happens is it doesn't work out, and the best that happens is every day is amazing.
You get a beanie, I guess. That's the best.
And yeah, again, I'd have to hop off camera, but no, I would totally get, yeah. You get a beanie too.
So I do know that consulting life, when you work in that operational role, doing IR, it's super stressful, because that ethos of get it done or resolve the incident or whatever that end state looks like, it comes with stress. So
yeah, a little bit.
You've got a little more gray than you've got last year. I remember about this time, but you've had pretty stressful roles throughout your career, and I don't think that you've leaned into that. It's just a byproduct of the work you've taken on by like you said, jumping in. So, what do you do when you get stressed out? When I work through stress, you kind of get bogged down to things, and jumping in does come with that. Wow, I've jumped in a lot. So what do you do? Like, what's your stress relief?
So I ride a motorcycle, which is.
Is it a motorcycle though?
The new one is, yeah. It's a BMW R9T.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, look, don't get me wrong, for the other bikers out there, I had, what he's alluding to is that after taking a break from riding, I stepped back into it with a Honda Monkey, which, while I am sitting, maybe you can tell from the face, I'm not the smallest individual, and as modded out as I got it, I couldn't get it above 65 miles an hour going downhill with wind behind me. That being said,
I don't think I would want to go any faster than that.
On a New Jersey highway, you absolutely do. But so that is one of the things I do. Riding motorcycles, as anyone who rides knows, extremely meditative, because the only thing you can do is ride or you die. Bluntly put, right? So you've all four. It's like being a drummer, except that I can't make music, so this is how I compensate, because all four limbs are doing something at the same time often. So that's one way I do it. Another way that I do it is, and this is going to sound like a cop-out, but remembering what is important in life. There's sort of the cliche about living to work and working to live. But at the end of the day, as passionate as you are about what you do, it is sort of a vehicle for your life, right? So keeping things in perspective. And I guess the last thing is because I've also oddly had a running theme of working with government, right? Of protecting the data of civilians. I have been lucky enough to have had engagements where I've been working at a national level for a government, helping them to secure their citizens. And again, as cheesy as it sounds, and I know we've had discussions about this, but
I mean, I've spent most of my career in the public sector. So the idea of just flag on it, you're doing the right thing, you're doing your part.
Yeah. So whether you want to call it mission, right, or whatever.
Well, I think it's a sense of contribution, right? And I think it helps you get fulfilled. And I think as long as that's what it is at the end of it, I don't find it faulty.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, right? As much as any of us, I'm super happy when I see that paycheck. But it helps that you arrived at it trying to make a difference.
Right. So, all right. That's work, Duckie. That's the intro. Let's move on to, where does Duckie come from? So outside of day job,
you know this story well because you were literally in the room, I think.
you're really active in the community. Like you're a goon at DEF CON. You mentioned the Mandarin Academy, Maritime Security ICS Village. And you're really hooked up with that. You're one of the founders of FrontCon. Like you're really, really active. So first, I want to dig into that. But first, I want to know where Duckie comes from. Because Michael Rodriguez, and I know that doesn't mix.
And it sounds really, by the way, hearing my name coming from you also sounds very strange. Mick and I have known each other for, my God, I think it's going to be 9 years soon.
About that, yeah.
So where does it come from? So like I said, I didn't grow up sort of in the scene, as it were, right? So I didn't have a super elite handle coming up. People just call me Michael, Emrod. I also, as much as I keep meaning to get a ham license, I don't have one, so thusly no cool call sign. So what I do, though, have is an odd love of rubber ducks. Just bear with me. It'll make sense in a moment.
I see a few on the shelf behind you, yes.
There might be a couple back there. Some might be from yourself. So what happens is, like, it's a crazy world we live in, for lack of better words. And we can put people on the moon and we can make rocks that think, right? However, we can take all of the advantages of the Industrial Revolution and we can make something as useless as a rubber duck that serves one purpose: make people smile. It doesn't do anything. If they squeak, that's a big feature. And sort of the absurdity and the sheer joy of that appeals to my brain. So, love of rubber ducks. It's our first day, and I'm saying our because, like I said, I think you were in the room. We're about to go onto the floor. All goons at DEF CON have a handle. One is kind of cool. Two, it prevents name collisions because you can imagine Michael Rodriguez, basically Latino version of
work there.
Yeah, Latino version of John Doe, right? And so I'm about to go on the floor. There is the wonderful person who is sort of wrangles us goons in the SOC and keeps everything running. And she asked, what's your handle? So I told her, my domain is blackducksec.com. So how about Black Duck? By the way, you'll never hear the following phrase ever again. She said, Black Duck sounds too cool. How about just Duckie? That works for me. And so that's where that comes from.
So backstory on this is when he says on the floor, what he means is Con. So Duckie and I were Michael and I'm gonna keep doing it now.
That's weird. It's uncomfortable.
We were at DEF CON our first year together.
Yeah.
And like he said, you have a handle. So that way I know exactly who you are. There's no name collisions. People just sometimes don't want their name getting out. It was an earlier thing. It's just your name in the community. And if you don't have one, they're going to give you.
You're going to get one.
So that's why I was curious, because who he's referring to is Dilo, who is the security operations den mother for all of us hoodlums that are on the floor every year. She gave you a cool one. Like, it could have been a lot worse.
It absolutely could have been worse.
Like, Duckie is great and it's fantastic and it fits you. And that's why I've always, I wouldn't have picked that. I'd pick something just the opposite, just be mean. So,
the side effect, by the way, is that people keep handing me ducks everywhere. I think I've got 3 on my desk right now.
It's fair.
So honestly, there's worse things that people can hand you randomly or that can happen to you.
Very true. Very true. So, Goon at DEF CON, we've been doing this. You're going to be same as me, 9 years next year. So, you're at DEF CON, come say hi to us. We're usually together. Is that how you got hooked up with the Maritime ICS, Maritime Security ICS Village, through DEF CON or through work?
Yes.
Yeah.
So another one.
What are the work they're doing over there? Because I've seen it a bunch, but again, when you're on the floor, you're working. It's really a chance to walk by and hang out. But I know they were under a different banner, but what are they doing specifically now with ICS Village?
So, So, man, this is one of those kind of funny things. Part of Mandiant is we have an ICS OT security offering, right? We do investigations, etc., education. I like boats. Might go with the duck theme. I don't know. So, like a lot of things that I do where I sort of blend personal and private life, I'm like, if I can find a reason to do assessments on boats and maritime technology, it probably will get me onto them occasionally. I'm still working on that. And then just general curiosity, right? So out of that was born, hey, it's a sort of niche part of InfoSec that doesn't get as much attention as it probably should. Myself and a couple of other researchers said, you know what, let's do something more formal. We'll probably talk about ThruntCon later, which is the same way ThruntCon came up, which is let's do something more formal so we have an excuse to make this part of our jobs, right? And maritime security was born out of that. It was kind of featured at DEF CON 1 year. It started to grow and then became part of the ICS Village. So now it's maritime security at the ICS Village. And it is an amalgam of a bunch of things, of awareness for maritime security, giving a space to people doing research. Mm-hmm. So things like GIS, which is basically GPS for boats, to sort of short version of it. But there could be.
Like, he's wrong. It's some comments coming in.
I know. But I'm
already.
I know. So there's dangers to navigation with that being spoofed, boats ending up in the wrong spot, countries that should not be doing business with other countries, messing with it to sort of hide the tracking of their vessels. And so that research often doesn't have like a place that it super fits, even though I think it should be everywhere. So doing things like that, letting people who are, again, researching in the field have a place to talk and present their research and also create awareness of these issues, right? Because as we saw, particularly during the pandemic, when there was shortage of pilots, air travel sort of disrupted, everything we need has been on a boat at some point, probably. And so it's pretty vital, right? One could argue it falls under CNI, critical national infrastructure. So
I think I would say yes, because I would get the same person to define critical infrastructure and you would be able to do it. So Maritime Security ICS Village is teaching DEF CON. You GothCon, I've been mentioning that part of it. I know your love. The idea of the community, the shared knowledge, we've talked about this, on Blue Nomicon, you and I have had conversations about the idea of passing knowledge and community knowledge, how sharing work knowledge is one thing, but sharing common interests is another thing. And sometimes those communities overlap.
Yeah.
Which leads us into, I want to just quickly, trust groups are always a big topic. I know you're part of trust groups, formal ones, informal ones that are just based on sharing information, ones that are based on social. Do you see a value, and do you see the idea of it getting lost? Like we were all part of a trust group, and out of that trust group, we've kind of formed a separate thing. So do you see like the tipping point in trust groups, but do you still see the value in them and the value in multiple trust groups?
So much I could talk about here. So yes, all the above. To put that in order, though, we have all of us in InfoSec, we have very strange jobs, right? And it's again another topic I know we've talked about, right? Sort of ad nauseum, right? We have very strange jobs. We have very stressful ones, but also ones that call on us to deal with a lot of stress. And we just work in ways that are sort of alien outside of the field, right? Because of the variety of topics we have to deal with, the poorly kept secret or best kept secret, which is we're not necessarily paid or paid well to be super, super smart, but we're paid very well to get really smart on things really fast, which means that our heads are sort of always running. So that's just a way of prefacing. There is an absolute value in spaces and places where you can talk to and associate with folks that are like you. And I'm not talking about like you in like the way that we look or gender or anything like that, but the way that we all sort of brain together.
Right.
Right, if that makes any sense. With trust groups, though, you have an area where at the barest level, you don't need a preamble every time you mention a concept or every time that you are trying to think about an idea out loud. Everyone's sort of tuned in to the same wavelength. That does, we talked before about what do you do to reduce stress. Well, one of the ways that you can reduce stress is not having to have the overhead of all of that kind of stuff when you're having a conversation, which
Right.
depending where you fall as far as being, neurodivergent, whether you are or not, there's a calming aspect of that. So these trust groups where you can do that are super important. At another level, right, like any sort of social structure, when something reaches a certain once it's got a certain amount of headway or it grows to a certain size, the extra variety of people can maybe make some of those conversations again sort of difficult. Whether you're keeping, trust group, the whole idea of, keeping things sort of to this small group, it'll splinter off, and that's fine too, right? That is a totally natural, normal thing, right? It's important to have spaces where you don't in any way ever question, do I belong there?
Right. And I think the advent of a lot of new communities we've seen this past few years, especially in the InfoSec community, kind of welcome those, and hopefully we'll see a lot more. So you kind of led off with this, and I want to just go because you kept talking. Your 20% job is how you described it, right? Now, first, walk us through what a 20% job is, and tell me what yours is, because I have so many questions, and they start with space malware. But what's a 20% job?
So, and this is one of the amazing things, honestly, of working about working at Google. So there's the concept at Google of a 20% role. 20% role, and by the way, it's
20% role, to be
20%
clear.
role, yeah. So everyone is encouraged at Google to take one on, and what it is what they say is, hey, you can take up to 20% of your week and spend it essentially on whatever you want. If it doesn't already exist as a project, you can propose it. There's sort of a steering board, and they'll say, hey, go ahead, take it on. Some of 20% roles greatest hits, Gmail, right?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, little product, Google Drive, right?
So also heard of it, yes.
Google Wave, pour one out. I loved Wave. Google Reader, same thing.
There has been no replacement. So who do I send that email to? Just let me know. We need Google Reader back.
I feel the same way. And by the way, for those of you who are like, hey, Google, where sometimes, great ideas go to die. Google Wave, right? If you remember that, which was like a weird mishmash of like Google Drive and email and instant messaging. Yeah, those all exist as separate products, basically because Wave was the beginning, right? So these ideas do come back. But my 20% role happens to be Google Space, which is, like I mentioned before, I think is part of cloud. It's dedicated to making space accessible to everyone, right? So the advantages of working in space.
Google really went literal with it, and you're, we've got cloud. Let's do space next. And
I didn't even think about that. Damn, I wish I had. So yeah, Astra ad omnis, right? Space to everyone, and yeah. So it's provided some amazing opportunities.
So the idea behind Google Space is that space, what? Like I get my own spaceship, or I get my own laser, my own little space suit, or
so I
what
wish
is the outcome, or like you said, take advantage of the ecosystem, or like take advantage of the advances in space. But like if I'm signing up for Google Space, or I want to learn more about it, what does that mean? Like what's the goal here? Like, so, space, everyone is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's nothing to sign up for yet. So it is very nascent. It's something we're definitely working on. But
of course.
But the idea being, and it's not necessarily putting things or people right into space, but it's the idea that again. So at one point in time, if you want to use email, you went to your campus lab, and then you had email. Right now, we literally have it all in our pockets and on our wrists.
Okay.
So the idea behind Google Space is to take all the advantages of the Google ecosystem we have now, find applications for it for space, and then making that accessible. So anyone, right? If you're,
So I'm a high school student. I've got a project. I've got an idea. I could leverage the ecosystem that Google has. I can't have my own space shuttle. I get it. All right. Maybe I'll get a beanie. But so I'll be able to
join us and you can.
So
yeah, exactly. So
what does that look like? Like what kind of data? Like my first thought, and I keep going back to space malware. Like, is that a real thing?
Not yet. Not yet.
That you know of.
That we know of. But
I saw Independence Day. All right,
that's right. And all you have to do is type upload, and it works.
Perfect.
Yeah. Different operating systems, not important. Basically, macOS is that advanced. Aliens will have already be using it.
I'll be honest. I think Jeff Goldblum can do no wrong. So
well, I mean,
work. So
we all agree on that.
So cybersecurity for space, it's the idea of the logs behind it, the lag time behind it. Like, what's the area to focus on?
So that actually is one of the first questions I started to ask myself when I started working with Google Space is what does cybersecurity for space look like? So it's a little question with a bunch of implications, right? So I'm still working on a definitive answer to that. Right now, it looks like cybersecurity for space looks like cybersecurity here on Earth, right? Sort of all the basic things that we need to take care of.
I think the movies would beg to differ.
The movies do beg to differ. But interesting things start to sort of happen when you think about that question, right? So there have already been multiple instances of satellites essentially being hijacked, going all the way back, I think now to like the early 2000s.
I believe there was some Ukrainian, Russian shenanigans satellite related earlier this year.
Yeah, there may have been. Now, in those cases, and in fact, in most cases, it's not. They took control of the satellites essentially by abusing the ground station, right, and the link up to the satellite. Double fortunate, by the way, is that propulsion and navigation is generally completely air gapped in the vehicle from the payload, right, which is the bits that do the science or the imaging or whatever. So that's, we have answers for that right now when it comes to protecting that stuff and that leg of the triangle, right? Things will get a little bit weirder once there is ever an instance where someone can sort of take over or manipulate on board, right, navigation and propulsion, right? Right now you could probably take control of that from the ground. That fortunately has not happened yet. But if you think ransomware is a problem on Earth, imagine if someone ransoms your satellite and threatens to send it into something else, making garbage and
their satellite and so on.
Yeah, and it's not great. The other thing you mentioned about lag, though, so eventually, right now, the biggest problem with satellite communications, with anything you do in space, is lag. Turns out space is really, really big.
It's far away.
It is far away. And so eventually, once more of the processing. So right now, if you have a satellite that's taking pictures, it's not processing those images on the vehicle. It's sending it back down to Earth. That creates lag. That takes a lot of time. Time, for various reasons, is money. So eventually, if we can do that processing in orbit on the satellite, that's awesome. But that's also something we can exploit, right?
Right.
And so that's as what Google Space will offer matures. As I try to answer this question, which is still mind-blowing that it's part of my job. As we go forward, it's answering these questions of when these things happen, what does it look like? What do we do? How do we deal with that? How do you do the first IR in space? Right? Side note, by the way, the first cybercrime in space has almost been committed. I say almost because the person was exonerated, but there was a case of an astronaut, a NASA astronaut, who was accused of accessing their ex-spouse's email from the ISS.
Okay, I think I remember that.
They were eventually cleared, but had they not been, it would have been the first cybercrime committed in space. There's been cybercrime in space, but it happened on Earth. So
I think the documentaries I've seen would really disagree with you on this point. All right, Ripley, I believe, would like a word from her alien.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. The entire program sounds incredible, and I'm really a little bit jealous that you're going to do all these super cool things. So to make me more jealous, what is the coolest thing you've done so far that you can talk about with regard to Google Space?
So, and this is for those of you that have imposter syndrome, this is not going to make it better. So you may be familiar with, so part of Google Space is also, and this is, you can imagine, not super hard. It's generating interest and engagement in and about space, right, within Google, right? So as you can imagine, not super hard to do. As part of that, we have sort of an internal talk series where we have, experts in everywhere from, anthropology and language potentially to, just hardcore science, aeronautics, astronautics come in and talk to us internally. So some of you may know a gentleman by the name of Vince Cerf, who is frequently referred to as the father of the internet. Crazy to think about, by the way, he's a co-worker. Vince Cerf works for Google Cloud. His official title is Internet Evangelist. It was pretty amazing that I needed to contact him about this. I asked people, it's Vince Cerf. Actually, it's Dr. Cerf. He's one of the reasons that we all have a job and sort of the underpinnings of the modern internet, right? If you don't know, he helped to create, he'll say he'll helped to, but he did a lot of the work. He helped to create TCP/IP, right? So no big deal there. Apparently I was told, you know what? He's a Googler. You can just call him Vint. No. I will call him Dr. Cerf until he corrects me. He helped invent the internet. So, but by the way, he answers his own emails. Would have never suspected. Very snazzy dresser. If those of you who might have seen a little movie called The Matrix, there's a character called the Architect. The reason he looks the way he does is because he looks just like Vince Cerf. So being able to talk with him, the part of his mentioning about imposter syndrome is that he created TCP/IP, right? Modern protocol that underpins almost all the modern internet. He is contributing to and helping to work on what's called DTN bundle protocol, which is delayed transmission networking, which is the formal way of saying interplanetary internet. So he's working along on that. The ISS is the first node of that. However, when we mention that space is really big, the other problem with that is that once you get past the moon, right, where things start to get measured no longer in seconds or minutes, they start to get measured in light minutes, light hours. Everyone's heard of a light year, right? Those are just the smaller versions of that. And there's a very interesting thing that happens in space is that time becomes a factor in communication. And things move, right, throughout. Everything's in relative motion in space. And so when you send a transmission, you can't just be like, hey, I'm going to point it at Mars. That doesn't work. You have to say, this transmission is going to take, several hours. I'm going to need to point it at where my target will be when it gets there. Well, and this is really relative, not too complicated in our solar system. Outside of it, extrasolar, it gets really weird. Vint, Dr. Cerf, said he might have to start working on GPS, not global positioning system, but galactic positioning system to enable eventually one day extrasolar internet. So Yeah, I'm constantly amazed that this is actually officially part of my job to get to think about these things and talk to these people. So that's been pretty wild.
Um, what is the most unexpected career moment that you've had so far? Like you never thought would happen. Was it emailing Big Surf, or is it the Google Space program?
Uh, wow. So the most unexpected career moment I've had. Uh, I think the most unexpected career moment I've had is my career.
That's fair. That's fair.
Total cop out answer, right?
No, no, I think all of us. If that's your answer, it's your answer.
Yeah.
I think it's Google Space. I think it's clear.
Yeah, it is. I was trying to think of something more insightful than repeating myself, but honestly, yeah. I mean, one of the amazing things again about where I get to work now, it's I thought Mandiant was amazing, and then joining Google, and the fact that yes, there's all sorts of things with a company that large, and sort of fully aware, especially with the advent of AI and machine learning and LLMs, large language models, and but every Googler I've interacted with, down to the single one, really, really, truly just wants to make the world a better place. Whether it's enabling communication, whether it's as they say, organizing the world's data and making it accessible. Now with Mandiant wanting to protect all that information, I really get to do amazing things with devastatingly brilliant people. I get the chance to talk to and work with people like yourself, who's also, to me, like
Really handsome. That's right.
Well, that is true, but I always think everyone else has a much more interesting job and career than I do. But yeah,
I
I'm
beg to disagree. I think you are doing amazing things. Um, Thank you for hanging out with me today and just chatting. I appreciate it. I know I'll see you at DEF CON next summer, and anyone else is going, we'll see us in the hallways with our red shirts.
yeah. There's that red shirt theme.
Right. What else is on your plate coming up soon? You got any trips coming up or any conferences? I heard something about B-Sides.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that one. So I started working for B-Sides NYC, which is back up and running after a couple years hiatus. I forgot about that one. But yes, so sort of a mutual friend of ours who works at the biohacking village at DEF CON asked me if I'd like to come speak at B-Sides PR next year.
PR.
Puerto Rico. Sorry.
Who watches this? You gotta spell it out.
I know. B-Sides Puerto Rico.
B-Sides New York City. Google Space. I am super excited at all the things that you are doing. And yeah, I will definitely see you at B-Sides New York. That's gonna be fantastic.
And B-Sides Puerto Rico.
Oh, I'm definitely coming to Puerto Rico. You're not gonna keep me away from that one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming. Thanks again for the chat, and to all the viewers. Next time you see Duckie in the hallway, give him a high five or give him a rubber duck. I guess he likes those. All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for our next episode of Coffee Talk with Surge interviews in about 2 weeks. See you later.